Hello and welcome to the Michael Mamas Show. I am your host, Michael Mamas, and we're coming to you from Mount Soma, home of the Sri Someshwara Temple in the mountains of western North Carolina. Today's Rama's birthday, Scotty. Did you know that?
No.
Yeah. What does that even mean, Rama's birthday? Of course, typically when we say somebody's birthday, it's the day they were physically born on. And when you look at something like Ganesh's birthday or Rama's birthday or what have you, there's actually a lot more to it than just that. Because, see, you can look at these things as aspects of divinity, personified aspects of divinity. And you can also look at these things as operators, functional operators within the unified field, within the absolute. And then there could be incarnations, like in the Ramayana when Rama incarnated into the physical world, all that's deep stuff. I mean, I could talk about any one of those things for a long time. But what I wanted to say about, Rama's birthday or Ganesh's birthday or whatever, is that there's a structure within the unified field. It's a self-interacting dynamic. As I've said, consciousness, which is the underlying basis of all existence, the unified field, it becomes conscious of itself, perceives itself as other. Then consciousness becomes aware of those two things. Now you got consciousness here and consciousness kind of doing a double take and seeing itself over there. And so consciousness becomes those two, cascades out to 3, 4, 5. And there's a very precise mathematical geometric structure to the thing. And the idea is that within that geometric structure, there are an infinite number of different points. In fact, if you're familiar with the Sri Yantra, normally it's thought of as a two-dimensional thing, but really it's a pyramid. And in the whole thing of Vedic literature, Vedic understanding, different operators, different personified values within the unified field, each is one with the totality, but they represent it kind of from a different, you could say, point within that structure, if you wanted. It reaches out and encompasses the totality of the structure, but the birth of it, the center of it, is located at a particular place within that structure. And so in that sense, the birthplace, if we take that structure and kind of spread it out over the face of time, because you see, within the absolute, there is no time. It's all kind of superimposed. It's beyond space and time. But what it can do is it's sort of like you take that structure of simultaneity, and if it's like a deck of cards, you spread it out over the face of the table, and it creates a sequentiality. And within that structure then of sequentiality, there are certain points. Oh, there's the birth of Ganesh, there's the birth of Rama. And that correlates then to a particular date. And it's kind of beautiful, I think, really, because otherwise, what does it mean, really? I mean, does that mean that Rama didn't exist until he was born in the physical? Of course not. This an aspect of the structure of existence. Rama, in that sense, is eternal. Just as all in modern physics, the unified field exists on a level beyond space and beyond time, you see. So anyway, that was just kind of a tangent to get started. Didn't even really intend to talk about it that much, but I think it's good to understand that sort of thing. And so very worthwhile taking an opportunity to look at it. Now, within the world today, I wanted to take a look at, current events, that is, this idea of globalism. And there's a good, we're trying to build this global world and this global society. And And then there's the idea of isolationism. Maybe we shouldn't do globalism. Maybe each nation should stay isolated, and there's debate between those things, isn't there? So I thought I'd talk about that a little bit because it's important. And especially now, I mean, if there is such a thing as globalism, I think it's getting to be pretty clear that it's not working very well, at least right now. And I think a great example, okay, you got the United States. And the United States decided to stop drilling for oil. So Saudi Arabia is drilling for oil, and other places, of course, Russia, whatever. And then a lot of things that China is manufacturing, basically Walmart, you go to Walmart, so much stuff is made in China. And so what's happening is we've taken so much money from the United States and dumped it into China, and build up China. And there's a certain global ideal of that. I mean, if everybody can be prosperous, isn't that great? And then at the same time, another thing that's going on now is we're taking money and dumping it into Ukraine to weaponry and things like that to protect them from Russia. So from a holistic globalist perspective, this becomes kind of an interesting dynamic, because on the one hand, we're taking money and we're putting it into weaponry, and it's certainly understandable. I mean, if all these women and children and people are getting killed on the streets, I mean, we can't just sit back, can we? So anyway, we're doing that. And then on the other hand, we're taking money and we're dumping it into China, and then China's taking a lot of its wealth and dumping it into Russia, so Russia can afford bombs and bomb Ukraine. So it's kind of like we're funding both things, and it really kind of doesn't make a lot of sense. And the whole history of globalism, Scotty, when you think about it, like Pol Pot and Cambodia. I used to have it down, but I can't remember right now. But the United States was an integral part of getting Pol Pot put into power. And then, of course, there's the killing fields of Cambodia. So that was a global move that didn't work very well. Afghanistan, maybe, I'm sure, okay, fine. Let's say we were well-intended. I don't want to get into that debate. But just for the sake of argument, let's say we were. Well, look what a mess it made. Vietnam. Look how many people died in Vietnam, and then we ended up leaving anyway, as we did in Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, and like right now, you can make the argument even that the money we're putting into weaponry for Ukraine, or you could say also it happened in Vietnam, it happened in Afghanistan, happened in Iraq. We put in money and it funds kind of a tension between groups and the innocent civilians and people, and as well as the combatants. It ends up being like this long, extended, slow grind of death and destruction. And so it gives us reason to pause when it comes to thinking about how well globalism actually works. And it's not just the United States. Any country that gets involved, I mean, before the United States, Russia was at war in Afghanistan, and that was a big mess. But globalism, you see, the idea of globalism, among other things, is this idea of comparative advantage. It's like, even in society, some people are good at dentistry. Other people are good at running a grocery store. So we have all these different areas of expertise. And by creating a system where we all work together and share, we all come out ahead. And, China's creating what it's creating, and just to simplify it, and then we go to Walmart and get things for cheaper. the United States, or what, service-oriented educational systems, whatever. And so we were all helping one another to prosper. But really, then so what's going on here? In theory, that's great, and it makes sense. And it's even a principle out of basic economics 101 that you might take in the first year of college, It talks about, what is it, comparative advantage. The idea that they specialize in this, you specialize in that, and everybody prospers. Everybody's better off. And so I guess in an ideal global system, we could have something like that. But the problem is that the consciousness of people, the consciousness of humanity isn't at a level, or at least we haven't attained the ability to maintain that in a responsible way where everybody flourishes. Instead, we empower our enemies and they come back and bomb another country or terrorize your country, or you go over there and end up, in the name of putting down a brutal dictator or whatever, end up trashing that nation. And it's just not working. And so we could say, and we'd be right, that, hey, just, let's get it together and let's just do it properly. Why can't we all just settle our differences and all get along and have a great world? Oh, if it were so simple. The world doesn't work that way. There is a global mentality. There's a global consciousness, like the level of sophistication, the level of evolution. Scotty, you know that movie? It was made back in 1951. What was the guy's name? Oh, I can't think of it in the moment. But The Day the Earth Stood Still.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that? The first one. I mean, it was a really good movie.
Right.
And Mr. Carpenter is the star. I can't think of the guy who played him right now. Anyway, Mr. Carpenter, was incognito, but he was the alien from a spaceship that landed in Washington, D.C. And he was there to kind of help the world. Main thing being that even back then, 1951, this whole idea that now that we have atomic weapons and we're talking about putting them in space, the other planets can't tolerate that. That's not okay. And so we either have to get it together or they're going to turn planet Earth into a cinders, what the movie was saying. But the point is that this Mr. Carpenter, incognito alien, was just looking at, the absurdity of, our planet. And there were little episodes here and there that kind of illustrated that, how material we are, how superficial we are. And the thing is that everybody watching the movie is like, oh, yeah, he's obviously right. Mr. Carpenter's right. The alien is right. And look how, foolish these earthlings are that they end up shooting him and killing him, or whatever. But it's really interesting. If we all watch that movie and all see it the same way, and oh, yes, of course, why did we do that? But nevertheless, we behave the way we do. Why is that? See, the level of consciousness isn't just a philosophy. It's not just an attitude. It's not just, oh, imagine if everybody was wonderful and loved each other and was kind to each other. So let's just think kind thoughts. How we function is a matter of the physiology and the level then of physiological, and I don't mean physiology just of the bones and tissues. I'm talking about the physiology of consciousness. I think a lot of times people don't even think, when they hear the word physiology, they don't think physiology of consciousness. They think physiology of the physical body. But no, we're talking about the subtle physiology, the foundation of consciousness and the physiology of consciousness. And from there, we get into this idea that there's group consciousness. And, group consciousness can sound like, oh, that's a pretty far out concept. And I don't know if I even believe it or not. But hey, you walk into a dingy bar in downtown Manhattan or wherever, and it's got a certain feel to it, doesn't it? Kind of grungy, whatever. There's a group consciousness there. You walk into a church, there's another feeling. It's a completely different group consciousness, you see? And there are all kinds of group, every family, within every family dynamic, there's a group consciousness, you see? And there's a global group consciousness. Maybe we don't even have to jump that far. We could start, the group consciousness in, I don't know, San Francisco is different than the group consciousness in Columbus, Ohio. I don't know. But you see, there are certain qualities there. The group consciousness in the United States is different from the group consciousness in Afghanistan, if you will. And so you take all that, then take another step back further, and there's a whole group consciousness, a global consciousness to the tonal quality of the world. And it's extremely far-reaching. It's not just then how people think. It's about how people interact with their environment, how they affect the environment. Not just because of how much pollution they're dumping, from how big a carbon footprint, but though that's part of it, but it's even more far-reaching than that. So in a very profound sense, if you look out in the horizon and see pollution in the horizon, it's not just from gasoline emissions, automobile emissions, or whatever. That's down the line a little bit. It's really an expression of group consciousness. You want to get rid of the pollution in the atmosphere, evolve the group consciousness, and then it'll sort out, be it through laws or regulations or new inventions, new technologies that don't pollute, what have you. But it's the group consciousness that determines everything. And that even is so far reaching that, we talk about, communism is bad and democracy is good, or what's the best form of government? What about a dictatorship? The reality is that, and this is coming right from the ancient seers now, all this is really, but the quality of life of a nation is a function of the group consciousness of the people in that nation. In that sense, we get the government we deserve. We get the leaders we deserve. And if the group consciousness is high enough, it doesn't matter if it's democracy or dictatorship or communism. But if the group consciousness is low, if it's at a certain level, that's what you're going to get is a society that lives a quality of life that's a function of that group consciousness. And it's a complex formula, so we can't say, well, okay, let's take a look. United States is a little more prosperous than this country, and so therefore our group consciousness is higher. It's more like a fudge swirl ice cream, or if you've taken a step back, or look at these global images of weather patterns, taken from the outer space, and you look at the Earth and you see these like clouds of different weather patterns swirling all over the planet in motion. Group consciousness works that way too. Now, it does tend, of course, the clouds tend to hover maybe in the mountains or in the valleys more so than in the desert. So there's certain tendencies. But the point is, group consciousness works that way. And to evolve the planet into a planet where globalism doesn't become a way of empowering another nation so they can go bomb you or bomb somebody else, or you get these really complex webs that are woven that are just completely nuts, with pipelines, oil pipelines and all this stuff, and the Ukraine situation and North Korea, Iran, Iraq, all these things are, we do the best we can on the surface because that's all we got short term. But what really is the main thing that's determining the quality of life in all the different countries throughout the world is the level of group consciousness. So if we want to heal the planet, the question then becomes, how do we do that? How do we do it? The UN had a nice thought, didn't they? United Nations, but they're ineffective. How do we go about it? Well, there are different levels of group consciousness. and we have to tend to them all. And the fundamental level of group consciousness is the individual. The individual. You have your own, you could say, a group of one, your own group consciousness. And your level of consciousness determines your relationship with the world. But it's been said that, an enlightened person in this age of oblivion, this Kali Yuga age of ignorance, gets kicked around like a football. So it can't be just one person evolving. Look at Jesus Christ. What did they crucify him, So it's got to be more than that. So we need, so then we can say, well, let's just get everybody meditating. And that's a great thought too. But people look at meditation and they just think it's weird. They think it's far out. Not that many people are doing it. We keep trying. We keep trying to educate people, explain the value of meditation. And we talk about the differences of the different kinds of meditation. And I've talked about that, ad nauseum, really. Some meditations help you concentrate. Some meditations actually just program your brain. Other meditations help you rest into the deepest part of your level of your being and integrate it with the surface. In other words, they evolve you. That kind of evolutionary meditation, I call proper meditation. Of course, you say that to a bunch of different people from all different systems of meditation. They all say the same thing. Oh, yeah, that's what we do. Another subject, how to sort that out. But anyway, proper meditation is one. But and the other thing is this this technology, this technique that radiates out a value that purifies the atmosphere, and not just the atmosphere based on carbon footprint, but global atmosphere, the global consciousness, the atmosphere of the global consciousness, and through purifying that deepest level, then all the other levels purify, just as we talked about only in reverse. Now, instead of the limited group consciousness creating pollution, now we're talking about a more evolved group consciousness purifying the atmosphere on all levels. That's the key to psychological health. And at that point, globalism will work. But we're far from that. We're far from that right now. And so then we might say, well, maybe what about isolationism? Well, there's truth to globalism and its importance. There's truth to isolationism and its importance. But either taken to too much of an extreme, particularly now in this age of, relatively lower, not as high as it could be, group consciousness, neither one really works all that well. In a really enlightened society, and globally enlightened society, there will still be unique qualities to each country. It's not going to become a whitewashing, a homogeneous continuum that we all think the same, we all function the same. All cultures will culture their people in a particular unique direction. But nevertheless, then there'll be a certain, if you will, isolationist, in the sense that there's a certain culture that we honor, that we love. It's unique to our country. And that culture also, there's the individual culturing, there's the family unit culturing, there's the community culturing, there's the national culturing, and then there's the global culturing, you see? And all that is a function of the consciousness of the people, the level of consciousness, the level of evolution of awareness, if you want to say it that way. And that's what's going to do it. And nothing else will work. Again, doesn't matter the system, doesn't matter the laws, doesn't matter anything. We do that as kind of patchwork, trying to plug up the leaks in the dam, with our thumbs and fingers. There's a short story about that, isn't there, Scotty? But anyway, that's short-term attempt to do something where really it won't work, but it might be some temporary kind of, at least, attempt. Because let's look at Ukraine right now as an example. What's the solution? I don't think there is one. I mean, we have to do something to do what we can to protect these poor innocent people that are getting slaughtered. But if we go, then if we send weapons, if we go too far with the weapons, then we could start thermonuclear third world war, and what a mess that would be. But how can you back off and just let them go in there and slaughter all these people? There is no solution other than what's going to happen is kind of like what happened in Vietnam, kind of like what happened in Afghanistan. Somewhere along the line, the chips fall in a particular direction, and we get what's left over. And we hope for the best, but historically speaking, over the past 50 years, it hasn't really worked out all that great, has it? What do you think, Scotty?
Yeah, no, it just seems like you're trying to implement things before the consciousness is ready.
Well
Whether
said.
that or even like something as simple as like, let's go eco-conscious and make everything green. Let's snap our fingers and start that. It seems like something that's
yeah, you see, that's another thing. That's such a great example. We want to go green, and so we stop producing oil in this country, and so then we start getting it from other countries. And the reason we want to do that is because we don't want to pollute the world, and that whole thing. But what happens then is now we're buying oil from countries that per barrel of oil pollute more than we would if we were pumping our own oil.
It's just,
yeah. I mean, none of it makes sense.
It's just not ready. It's not ready for it.
And that's right. And I'm no authority on this one, but I've been told by people that I really respect as, knowledgeable in this arena that the new gas engines, the gasoline cars, don't pollute nearly as much as they did, 50 years ago, Scotty?
No, easy. Yeah.
Yeah. But the manufacturing of the things that go into manufacturing an electric car pollute more than a new modern gas car would produce throughout the life of the car.
Yeah.
I mean, we can go on and on like that, There's one other thing along that I want to mention. It's a little tangential, but not really. If you talk politics, one thing I've noticed is that if you talk politics, so much of the time, it's not about the issue. Like, for example, what issue? The border. It's not about the border, the southern border of the United States. Quickly, it just flips over to whether or not they use the word hate. You don't like Trump, and so it becomes like a character assassination of Trump or a character assassination of Biden or of, Harris or Pelosi or what's that guy's name that does news? A newscaster, be an extreme conservative or extreme liberal. And it ceases to be about the subject. It ceases to be about the topic. It's more about the people that you like or don't like versus let's really talk about the topic intelligently. And also, if you take a stance on something like the border, it ceases to be about the border right away, and then you get labeled. You're a liberal, or you're a conservative, you're a Republican, you're a Democrat, And so it's kind of like we very quickly take our eye off the ball and start focusing on, assassinating, in a sense, character assassination of the people we don't agree with. Where's that get you? Who's the guy? Who was that guy who said, I may not agree with what the other person's saying, but I would defend their right to say it with my life. Patrick Henry, I think it was. Yeah, something like that. Anyway, you get the idea. The approach, see, as people evolve, even the definition of spiritual has to change. Oh boy, there's so many things that come to memory. But anyway, spirituality, all too often people try to divorce it from rationality. Spirituality, we have a connotation that it's kind of loving and floaty and I'm okay, you're okay, or, what have you. But that's the beauty of Vedic knowledge. It is rigorously scientific, but it's rigorously beautiful and feeling and loving. Incarnations of love, like that. But also the branches of Vedic studies are so profoundly scientific and rational. And it's when those things get integrated, it doesn't mean that you have to become a scientist. It doesn't mean that you have to become a musician, but it means that those qualities, those values are well integrated within your physiology. And when you talk, it makes sense. You see? I guess that's it in a nutshell, huh, Scotty?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, some of those things we could go on forever, but all these things we could go on forever. And that's one of the challenges with doing a podcast like this is, they got to be kind of short. And, but so what we're doing here is we're approaching, and so we're leaving it to you, the listener, we're leaving it to you to try to put these pieces together in your own head. Consider this more food for thought, as opposed to, I'm going to say things wrong. I'm going to say things that I didn't communicate it well. You're going to hear things that it's not the way I was trying to say it. And so, work with that, please. And what we're doing here is we're trying to build that unified field generator right from the ancients. And it's the technology that evolves consciousness of people. And when you do that, all the different inventions, how did they build the pyramids, all these different great things the ancients did that we just boggles our mind today. Those technologies too are structured in consciousness. As the consciousness evolves, those sort of technologies and all those different knowledges will avail themselves to us. But we have to evolve how we think, how we function, how we live, how we breathe, and that's what Mount Soma is all about. And by the way, if you're willing to, make a donation, you can go to shrisameshwara.com, or you could even go michaelmamas.net and just look up above and you'll see places where you can donate, or you can go to the Sri Sameshwara website and there's a place there you can donate. We could really use your help and your support. Long term, as I've said, we have big plans, but even in the short run, just to help support us from day to day, even a very small donation is greatly appreciated. Okay. And I guess that's it for today. Thanks for listening. And Scotty, if there's nothing else, we'll just talk to them all next week.
All right.
Okay. Goodbye. Thank you.